I know, for example, I've been pulled into pitches at the last minute when it's a streetwear client because they think that it will help sell the brand a lot more because I am the epitome of urban, apparently.
For my culture, you know, a normal 9-to-5 successful job is not really public relations.
So when you're looking for who is the ideal person, if you haven't got that lens or that experience or someone who can support you with that, how are you ever gonna hire people that are not the same as you, unless you are truly saying this is about culture ad.
I just thought I'm sick of asking people to be accepted. I will create the space I want and I believe should be part of the future of the comms industry.
But I don't think the problem is actually attracting Black or Asian talent. It's explaining it and then when they get in, making it an inclusive place to want to work.
I did the same application, didn't change anything, changed the name. I got invited for an interview. And I was just like, so it really messed me up. It made me hate my culture. I kind of internalized all of that.
Welcome to London College Communications Value Talks, a series where we bring together figures from across the creative industry and talk about their importance in creativity and in contemporary culture. Today we'll be discussing diversity and inclusion in the field of PR. Not only why representation matters, but finding your niche and the importance of making a positive change. I'm surrounded by an esteemed panel, and Mo, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Mohammad Qazalbash. I graduated from LCC on the PR degree, and I'm currently head of publicity at Live Nation Entertainment.
Cam?
Hi, I'm Kamiqua Lake, or Cam. I graduated from London College of Fashion, or UAL. I can't actually remember when, a very long time ago. And I founded my own agency called Coldr. We do purpose comms. I'm also founder of the UK Black Comms Network, and I sit on the board for the PR and Communications Association.
Hard to follow, but I am Rachel Allison. I am the founder of an agency called Axe and Saw, which is, again, quite similarly focused on purpose-driven communications. I graduated the same year as Mo, but I was also late to uni because I am a bit of a wild child.
Great, and today we're going to be talking about diversity and PR. So, first question for you guys, how diverse is PR as an industry? Silence.
I mean, not diverse. Easy answer.
Is it changing? Shall I ask? Is it changing, or are we just, is it not?
I think we're in like beginning stages of people understanding change actually needs to happen, or not necessarily acting on the change, but vocalizing that the change needs to happen. And I think it also depends like what sector of PR you work in. Like if you're working in pharmaceutical banking, you know, I don't imagine those are very diverse areas, period. But if you move into kind of more culture, entertainment, art, expressive art, you do see there's definitely more diverse candidates there. But I do think, yeah, it is changing, but I guess it's changing on the surface, not actually changing in terms of a concept.
Yeah.
I would say it's not that diverse. I think the stats are that it's 79% white British and then maybe 10 to 12% white other. And 3% of professionals come from a Black background. So that's not even thinking about all the other kind of minorities and all the other ways that you can look at diversity in PR. So it's still very much a white middle class over indexes in terms of being privately school educated industry. And I think we're starting to see people, you know, even the fact that we're having this conversation, we're talking about it a bit more seriously. But we still know that even when people come in, they don't stay in the industry. So I think there's a stat around, you know, 2/3 might come in and might be more diverse, but actually when you get to kind of middle management or senior, there's a lack of representation from different sort of ethnic groups, but also ability versus disability, and also from different class backgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, the stats kind of speak for themselves, and I'm sure we can all speak from personal experience that we are often the only one who isn't white in any room we go into. And I'm sure we've all got personal experiences that can really highlight how much it is lacking in the industry. So I know, for example, I've been pulled into pitches at the last minute when it's a streetwear client because they think that it will help sell the brand a lot more because I am the epitome of urban, apparently. So it's all those kind of like small microaggressions that you come across in your day-to-day that really signify that this, as an industry, hasn't evolved that much and still really isn't, as you've kind of said, like the culture space seems to be kind of progressing in the right direction, but it always should have been progressing in that direction because often people of colour, and particular black people, are the ones that are creating the culture. So it should be highly overly indexed in that space, but it isn't. So I don't know, there's like a lot to be said about.
Yeah, and also I think like PR is really good at PRing itself. So they're not going to be very being like, well, we do have a diversity issue, but I think it kind of stems from, as you said, like as an individual, you have to be quite, you know, and this might come across a bit kind of, you know, cutting, but quite privileged to get into PR. You know, PR is a lot of media consumption, a lot of understanding. When I say culture, I mean culture within media, not culture in the world around us. And people who are afforded the time to take in things like art, take in things like current affairs, have a knowledge of politics, often aren't people like us. You know, we didn't necessarily have summers to do free internships, you know, one after the other and gain access to the industry or whatnot. So there is definitely that kind of skew there, or that barrier that comes into it. So, you know, I think, you know, and we don't kind of address that. We don't address the fact that we do actually, as an industry, unfortunately, really do take advantage of new talent when they come in, and probably explains
free
why.
labour.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then explains why they all want to leave.
Yeah.
Call spades.
Yeah, it's free labour, and you know, I do a little bit of teaching on the agency life course for LCC, and you know, particularly still in fashion, still in music, that's where a lot of students are doing the internships, and that's because that's where it's free. And then equally, I think the more corporate side of PR isn't engaging with unis as much. So there are more paid internships, but then I think the relationships with unis aren't as strong. So, but I think they're stronger with those kind of more culture or fashion and music spaces because they really need the free labour. And so I think until things like that change, we're always going to have a bit of a diversity issue and inclusion issue, I think, in PR.
And for the more, lack of a better word, hardline subjects, for example, in PR, is it a question of people from different diverse backgrounds aren't going there because the people, they don't see the faces there? I mean, I'm guessing that you more, if you're black and you're going into PR, you probably want to go into music because you know the favourite artists and favourite musicians that you follow are black or from different backgrounds. Is that the case?
I think possibly. I mean, like, I can only speak on like my personal experience. So like, I'm Pakistani, South Asian, Muslim. So like for my culture, you know, a normal 9-to-5 successful job is not really public relations. And also, like, I remember I've got this like,
what is a successful job?
Sometimes I wish I listened to my parents and became that dentist. Exactly. But you know, but when I told my parents I wanted to do a degree in public relations, like bless them, they thought it was a degree in customer service, like because they don't understand. And a lot of kind of community groups, a lot of ethnicities don't always look at media or new media as kind of viable, safe careers to go into. You know, my parents moved here in the 60s. So for them, their kind of mentality was like they want to set their children up, you know, moving to a new country and wanting them, like any parent would want for their kids, 100%. To make sure that they're settled and that they're risk-free. And it's quite funny because you look at that being quite backwards and you look at that being quite an ageist kind of view, but it's actually because they see it as, well, where is my child going to be most protected? Where are they less likely to be discriminated? If you are a doctor, you are a doctor regardless of your race. However, I'm not saying that, you know, there's D&I issues in those sectors, but you know, those are areas that you're less exposed and you're not going to come across the kind of white collar nonsense that we've all had to kind of go through. So I think that's kind of one of the for me anyway, that was one of the barriers for sure.
I would also add to that there's a lack of understanding, I think, within, well, I'll speak from my own personal experience as well, like within the black community, what PR actually is. Like, I remember, like, doing summers where you'd like hand out flyers and everyone would say that was PR. And I actually genuinely thought that was what PR was. No one in my family had heard of PR, and then the people that had always kind of assumed it was like you working, being like, what's that old like reputation, like spin doctor, like with the Prime Minister just like spinning some bad stories. It was like that energy, and so
shout out Alistair Campbell.
like that era is basically what they thought PR was. So there's a real, and I really still believe that is the case for other minority communities. There's a real lack of understanding as to what PR is, what role it plays, what the job actually entails, and then how you can get into it. I think when you combine all those things, it's no wonder that there is a lack of understanding and a lack of people wanting to get into the industry. The only time you kind of see cool PRs is like if you're the PR for Beyonce and if you're getting to do all these concerts, and then you're kind of really bigged up within the industry, but like you don't really hear about the person, I mean this is a bad example, but the person that heads up PR for Shell, like you know, like they've managed to change the image quite a lot with electric cars, and that's quite like a massive understanding if you don't get what PR is, and I think that's what is also lacking.
And to add to that as well, like PR is just not one discipline. Like there is a long kind of spectrum. Like you have corporate comms, reputation management, investor relationships, all those type of things. You know, publicity is actually one of the very smallest functions of PR. You know, it's a really important tool for any business. So I think also that kind of lack of understanding as well is kind of added to that narrative.
I'd agree with you. I think PR is good at PRing itself, but not very good at explaining what PR is. And from, you know, with the Black Comms Network, for example, we did some research. We know that like 70% of Black talent is in-house versus an agency. So I think that plays to some of what rings true about what you were talking about a real career. So preferring to work for a company rather than an agency, which is a little bit like, what does that mean? What are you doing? Is that secure? But then also really a lot of Black talent are in corporate, charity, housing, purpose, where you feel like you can make a difference. So in some ways, there is a real appetite to be in the more traditional or more serious areas, as well as the spaces where culture, where culture tends to be, or where people tend to think of culture more normally. So I'd say that actually if PR did a better job, or the industry did a better job of talking about itself, explaining all the different disciplines, explaining that you could do PR for Shell or for Beyonce, and what the differences might be, then you would attract more Black talent. But I don't think the problem is actually attracting Black or Asian talent. It's explaining it, and then when they get in, making it an inclusive place to want to work.
So the PR industry needs a PR agent. Are we?
As communicators, they're really bad at communicating.
But then I do also think, just to quickly add to that, I tend to see the more money is involved in a job role and the more kind of like prestige, the more they try not to explain it to the average person. So there's like this weird like grey smoke and mist around what PR is, because you either think it's like the fashion PR where it's kind of like posh girl goes in and she's like doing, what's that film called, like Betty? Ugly Betty.
Devil Wears Prada.
That's classic.
I mean, it's a good film. I definitely was inspired by it. Don't get twisted. But you kind of have that image, or like the imaging of the industry is just the bit that's confusing.
Yeah, there is like definitely some mystique to it. And I think we all even do that in our kind of everyday. Like you have to add a bit of like, you can't give away all your cards as a PR, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It's competitive, and the nature of being a PR is that you're behind the scenes. So the nature of being behind the scenes and the client, the product, the service, whatever it is you're trying to promote, taking the limelight, means naturally you're always in a place where people don't always understand exactly what you do. But also it's because you're just a jack of all trades. Like you're doing, like you're saying, 1 minute a press release and then you're doing a press trip. Then how do you explain all of those different things in a way that is meaningful for someone to understand, okay, what does that mean I'm doing on my day to day? When a lot of PR people always say you come into it because you are doing different things all the time. I think then the challenge with that sometimes from a Gen Z perspective is, when you see those like tweets and posts around, I'm expected to be a marketing manager, write posts. And that is PR. Like PR, 1 minute you're expected to write a social post, and then you might be managing a press conference, then you might be managing a press trip, then, and it's marrying, I guess, what talent want to do, what diverse talent want to do, making sure they're paid appropriately for that, but helping them to understand that it is almost 10 jobs in one, and that is the beauty of it, rather than you're not being exploited because of it. And I think that's sometimes the language I definitely see amongst sort of grads around the social marketing.
And also, I do think, like, with no disrespect to the kind of talent that are upcoming, but they are a different breed. They definitely know what they want. They definitely like.
Explain that.
Well, like they know what they want. They know what their value is.
Don't attack the new generation, please.
I wish,
guys,
no,
not me.
I wish I had some of that gumption when I was like first starting out. Like, I think that is quite good at knowing what you want and kind of that also.
You did have that.
But as in, like, not to the extent, I reckon, if like someone that's coming out of uni now, I think it's like they're very much like very firm and being like, well, this is where I see myself valued at, this is what I want, this is exactly, and kind of managing up, which is actually a really important skill in PR, because it can get very stagnant and can get very kind of, you do end up halting yourself if you're not careful. So I think sometimes that as well, you need to have that progressive eye to just be like, I'm going to navigate and make my PR career whatever I want it to be, and that's the beauty of PR. It's so like
equally, you have to learn. You actually do have to start from the bottom. And I definitely thought I was like a little like chihuahua at points when I was like starting out. I was like, no, I know how to do this, and I didn't. I actually didn't know how to do it, and people would be like, no, you still need to like learn how to, I don't know, make influencer boxes or whatever before you're going on a press trip. And you kind of need to know that basic element, because when you do work your way up, how are you going to pitch it to your client? How are you going to deliver the result unless you know how every single element of it is run? And I do think that is the right way to progress through.
Totally, yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of people want to run before they can walk. And that is...
I think you're right. I mean, when I just walked past the sign that said, if you want to start as freelance, like graduate and go straight to freelance. I'm not saying that there's pros and cons of that, but literally PR is about experience. Like, you put one brief on the table, we'll all approach it slightly differently based on our experience. And so, I think you've got to make sure you understand that your lived experience, your experience in the job, your experience working on different clients and accounts and navigating that is what makes you kind of a richer sort of PR person. So again, but to your point that you made earlier about being able to intern, free internships, free labour, these are all of the things that make it a challenge, where one candidate might present as better than the other, and where you might then, diversity drops off again, because it's about being able to do those things or have those life experiences, so that when you're in an interview, you can even answer some of those questions or have some idea of how you might approach a challenge. Because essentially we're problem solvers. And if you haven't had that experience of problem solving, whatever that might look like.
What I would ask is did you expect it to be so diverse in terms of what you were doing, or did you leave uni with the idea that, because I guess you all left uni with the idea you wanted to work in PR, right? But did you expect to be doing so many things? Like, as you're saying, from going to a press conference to writing a press release to writing a social post, probably all in the same day if you're working with certain people. Because I can imagine. So did you expect it to be that hands-on and diverse, or was you just like, oh, I'm this PR agent and I'm going to do this?
I would say from my perspective, I didn't really know what PR was. I definitely, I went to school, did my A-levels, all that kind of standard stuff. And then the choice of like what to do at uni came up, and I was going for like, I just thought I liked writing, I liked history, hated the essays. That was basically the toss-up. So I was like, I'm just gonna chill for a bit and I'm not gonna go to uni, much to my parents. I like horror. So tried to do other things, kind of fell into like working in retail, and then someone had a PR agency that they were just starting, so I had like a little bit of exposure. Went to the Fashion Retail Academy, thought I wanted to do fashion retail, classic. And there was a teacher in there that was the PR teacher, and I thought that he was the most fun. And I just like to go out, I like to talk to people. It's literally this basic. This was how my thinking went. I was still young, guys. And I was just like, okay, he seems the most fun. He seems like the things that we're doing seems like the closest to what I'd like to do in the future. And so that was genuinely what pushed me to do a PR degree. And then on the degree, I was like, oh, there's actually
Yo.
not quite what I was thinking. So we don't go out, okay, cool. We just do loads of work, okay, cool. But like, also I think in the age that I was going through uni, social media was just picking up. And I strangely, like, don't know why Gmail decided to do this, but linked my like blog post that we had to write for uni. It was really cringe. It was called like A Rambling Thinking. I was just like, oh, it's so cringe. I looked at it the other day, I was like, I really didn't understand what a blog post was, showing my age. But like, that was quite a new thing. And like, I remember like sitting in social media lectures being like, what is this stuff? Like, you know, they're talking about Twitter and metrics. And I was like, this is not what I signed up for. That sounds really sciencey. I don't like this. And like, it's just amazing how much the industry has quickly evolved, and actually how quickly you have to adapt being in PR. And I think that's what makes it exciting. I was always a person that didn't stay in jobs that long back in the day, like 16-year-old kind of vibe. But like, as I got into PR, I actually just got quite addicted to the like fast pace, and you don't actually end up leaving very often unless there's a reason to. Like, it's just that much of an evolving, changing atmosphere that you always feel quite excited by it. And I, as I said, get bored quite easily. So that was essentially why I got into PR.
I don't know, for me, I think when I started, I was doing a few internships whilst at uni. So my weekends were really, really fun because I'd cram in my weekend job, go to uni, then do, you know, my various bits here and there. I think it was what I expected it to be, but I knew before I came into uni what I wanted my career path to be. Unfortunately, that sounds quite sad and depressing, but I genuinely knew. But I think one thing I'll always say, and if you genuinely have that passion, do your homework. Like, I think I really frightened a lot of people on LinkedIn with the aggressive stalking or whatnot. But it works. It works. And like, I've been in situations now where, you know, I can talk about this candidate who I interviewed and didn't end up getting the job, and they literally hit me back up and they convinced me to be like, actually, no, you're making a mistake here. So I'm always all ears, and because of like how I was trying to get in, you know, I'm very kind of open to that. But yeah, it was definitely what I expected. 10 years later, nothing surprises me, unfortunately. You're just like, and I think that's the attitude you kind of have to have. It's like, you are that doer, that fixer, the master of like dark arts almost. And you'll be really surprised what people think is like down to the PR department. Like, you're just like, really?
It's normally not.
It's normally not. It's
and
like,
then what is us? No one really.
Everyone forgets to tell us about it. We're like, hey, we kind of needed that info. Yeah, definitely.
For me, I was talking about it earlier, that I basically wanted something where I could write and be creative. The mum's side of the family is really creative. My mum's a fine artist, went to of Central St. Martin's, etc. So really kind of creative. And my dad had his own business, all about consistency. Find one thing you're good at, stick to it. And so I chose PR because I felt it gave me a mix of the kind of academic writing, getting to know something, but also was quite creative. Went to London College of Fashion, and I think I got the shock of my life because I was quite academic, not your typical fashion student, not sample size, black. I mean, I was 50 of us, about 3 of us were black. And everyone was like, oh yeah, you know, my dad works at OK, or everyone was connected. And it was the first time I hadn't understood the whole piece around connections outside of who you went to school with, or who you went to, who was around the corner, or who you were friends with. Everybody had connections in the industry and might have been doing a degree for various different reasons. So that was a bit of a culture shock because I really felt like an outsider from the very start. And actually halfway through, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I wanted to quit. I was doing an internship at Exposure. So I'd work like half the week doing an internship, doing the degree, and my mum wouldn't allow me to quit. So I was like, okay, fine, I have to keep doing it. And then and I really enjoyed fashion, but I didn't enjoy the industry of fashion. I loved clothes, and also free labour was at its worst then. I'd be lugging bags of shoes to Vogue and be like, from Stratford to wherever, or the right foot's in Stratford and the left foot's in Notting Hill. You need to go to both. And then, it was like mad free labour. And I just thought, I don't know if I could do this forever or afford to do it. And also the culture of it, there was a lot of drugs, there was a lot of things that were not, that didn't fit with some of my sort of values. So So yeah, at one point I wasn't really sure, to be honest. It wasn't what I expected at all. But it was a real challenge to sort of learn PR, and learn what it meant to be a PR person. So I think that the key thing that definitely I've learned is just that, you know, there's a lot in the industry around, you know, if you're in fashion, you stick to fashion, or if you're in corporate, you stick to corporate. It's like nonsense. Like, you're going to learn about yourself as you go through and work out which bits of PR you love, which bits you really don't like, and then hopefully find those brands or companies or the discipline that you really like and do. And just really, you've got to follow your own kind of personal journey with it, because if I just stuck at fashion PR is not for me, okay, let me find something else, I wouldn't still be in PR now.
Yeah, and just to echo that, so I also started off in fashion PR. It was so bitchy. Like, you really need to be made of something, so well done to any fashion PR out there. I couldn't hack it. And then I went into broadcast PR, which is also like a very under the radar element of PR, but I loved it because it was very much like quick, immediate results on the phone. It was quite salesy, but you really had to understand news. So like a lot of people that worked there were ex-BBC. I learnt so much from them, did that for a while, and then I went into kind of a more traditional consumer agency and kind of like have evolved since then. But like, to your point, you really do just find out, like, and at that age, that was probably the right environment for me. Like, going in, just like getting results quickly, seeing it, instant gratification, loved it. That was exactly what I needed. And then when I've kind of developed and understood properly, like the news hook, when stories are timely, all that kind of background stuff that you need to know in PR, then it made more sense for me to kind of move into the more consumer side of thing and work on campaigns and all that stuff.
It is quite funny because I guess it's like, I don't know, everyone's career is different, but the main constant for majority of people in PR is that you have to do that initiation at an agency. You need to know how to do cutting books, you need to know how to field calls, you need to turn over 6 coverage reports before 9 a.m. before the client. Like, what client is reading a coverage report at 9 a.m.?
I don't know. Why do they do this to us? Tell us.
But I think it is like you are right, it is like a rite of passage, and it's a great place to kind of like learn yourself and discover yourself. But yeah, some agencies can be a bit more trickier than others, I'm sure.
Well, I got told, when I graduated and I was going for my first rounds of jobs, everyone was like, why did you do a PR degree? I just hired my friend to, like, down the pub. Like, it was, you know, and that is what PR still is. It's very much is about who you know. And that's, again, back to that diversity point, why we are where we are, because, you know, people hire their friends, or if you need a job doing quickly, it's like, who do I know that can do it? But I really struggled to get in with a degree. And particularly when I was first sort of going for fashion jobs, and I ended up going in-house first for that very reason, because I struggled to get an agency job right off the bat.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you guys, how do you, because I've had that in my own industry, just like, you don't realise until you start having like a candid conversation with someone that you went, oh, you went to that school. And then you think of like, and I think of my secondary school, and I'm like, and then I remember someone asked me, like, I remember I was sat around the table and they were like, oh, like they were all naming the famous people that went to my school. And I'm just like, yeah, so at break time, we used to run through the corridors and there used to be fights and we all used to run around like, my secondary school probably hates me now, but it's just like, they were like, what secondary school do you see? Like,
You won't be invited back.
yeah, I was like, don't really want to talk about it, but like, how do you get over like the idea of connections? Because I think that's such a, I think people, we talk about D&I and we talk about like getting more faces in the door and everything like that, but actually you don't realise like this is like, you're dealing with people that have friends of friends of friends. Yeah. So it's like, I'll be speaking to someone that's my age and before they even know it, just because of who their parents are. And their parents may not even be like, I'm not talking about David Beckham and Victoria Beckham. I'm just talking about like, oh, they just went to school with this guy and his guy, and this guy had a friend of a friend. And it's like, oh yeah, like my dad came from Nigeria. Like, you know, like,
it's really frustrating. Like I came up against a lot of that when I was trying to enter the industry, and it is just probably the most devaluing, most horrible thing to experience. Like, it's no one can explain it because you yourself are an exceptional candidate, right? Right. You may tick all the boxes. Yeah. But someone else, you know, and also like, let's be real. In life, it's always good to learn about rejection. You need to have multiple rejections because every rejection is different. It's character building and everything, but but also it can actually really mess you up in so many ways. Like, you know, being in a room full of people that don't look like you or can talk about things that you can't. Like, I feel like I wear many different faces in certain rooms. Like when I'm in rooms with certain people, I need to behave a certain way. That was how I was kind of trained in PR. A real big like knock to like my confidence or whatnot I had is that I went for a job at a very high profile agency for obvious reasons they won't be named. I knew I fit the description exceptionally. I was like, this is who they're looking for. Sent in my CV, didn't hear back, which I think is also very rude. Employers, if you're going to turn someone down, just say no.
Yeah.
I then reapplied because this was at the time of, I think it was like, I don't know, the Westminster Bridge like terrorist attack or whatnot. So my first name is Mohammed. I was like, I don't know, because I used to hear about subtle racism and microaggressions, and I never used to believe it. Like my brother, my sister always used to tell me about it. I was like, yeah, whatever. Like you lot are just glass half empty. I did the same application, didn't change anything, changed the name. I got invited for an interview. And I was just like, so it really messed me up. It made me hate my culture. I kind of internalized all of that. So that's quite, like it just goes back to that point of, that's not right. And we definitely need to change that. And kind of looking at the label or the status or where you come from are those big kind of barriers to entry, because it's like, yes, you'll employ someone that you may know or may have a recommendation from, but who's to say that person who wasn't able to afford to do the free internship at Adidas for the weekend, for the summer, isn't an exceptional creative and could be what the industry needs or has some of the best ideas because of their surroundings, you know? So yeah.
I completely agree with you, and that's why I am Kamiqua. I don't mind people calling me Cam because it's easier, but when I first was applying for jobs, I was Cam because it was just easier. They couldn't struggle to get it right, and it helped me get through the door. But then what I would do is my signature, I'd make it Kamiqua, but it'd always have to be a decision. Can I? Should I? Is this going to be okay to do it? And then it's only when I became more senior and I stopped caring, I would just be Kamiqua, and that's how you call it. but you know, because you know sometimes it would happen where you get into a job and they would do Cam automatically, and it's like they wouldn't even ask the question. And it's such a tiny thing, but that's your name.
Totally.
And even if it's just, and if that's the first thing that you're having to switch it up for, just to fit into the culture, it does have an impact on you. But I think we weren't necessarily having those conversations at those times. We were just very used to being the only in the room. I remember when I went for my second job in an agency and the receptionist was black, and I was like, yeah, you know, and I thought maybe this means that it is more, no, I'm the only one. And then when that person leaves, you're like, oh my God, I really am the only one. So yeah, I think all of those things make it challenging. It does make it challenging in PR. I think we're getting a little bit better, but I wouldn't be surprised if people are still changing their name, shortening their name, getting rid of experience where they might have done it in, you know, I'm doing a recruitment round at the moment, and you know, where they might have worked in India or they might have worked in a different country before they came here. We need to make it a safer space for people to feel comfortable
to be themselves,
or to not have a British.
And that's also a shame that like we all feel like when you get to a certain seniority in your career you can be your true self. You know, that in itself is actually a really big problem. We all need to work on that around this table. Like you should be feeling welcomed and accepted from inception, rather than trying to fake it till you make it and prove yourself and then be like, okay, cool. And I feel more the most unapologetic version of myself now. But when I started, absolutely not.
Because don't you see it as the rite of passage? Like you say, there is a rite of passage for PR, but as coming from someone who has a minority background, that rite of passage is so much harder, different. You've got, because you almost know what you're battling against. You're not having those conversations. There's no one else in the office who looks like you or might be having a similar experience. But you're having to do all of those things before you can almost come out as whatever, you know, as your unapologetic self.
I was just going to add to that, which is slightly a little bit off piece, but I was thinking I had a paid internship, which really saved me when you're going back to the connections element. And I thought, because I couldn't afford to do non-paid internships, like I was commuting in from home, didn't have money, et cetera. So I had this paid internship and it was like a godsend. It was a really big agency. It really helped me on my CV. and they had like 4 graduates that did it, and 2 of them were black, 1 of them was Asian, and 1 of them was white. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I can't believe I've got this. Like, it was such a prestigious thing. And then actually when I was in the environment, in the workplace, which is a huge agency, there was no one else that looked like us. So I was very aware that it felt uncomfortable from a really early stage that I was black, and that, you know, I was working on hair products, for example, that didn't cater to my hair. And that, like, you know, there was just so many like moments where I felt very like out of place in that paid internship. So while I was like firming it because I knew I needed to for my CV, I hated every moment of it, but I knew I had to kind of have it on my CV. So back to the connections and back to sometimes diversity hires, it still needs to be an inclusive environment so that you actually genuinely, if there isn't people that look like you, then get a mentor in that can support the person through their journey.
100%.
There's things that can be done, and it's just like, you can't just do a diversity hire anymore.
And also the person that's looking for that talent needs to be a diverse candidate themselves, because otherwise you're not truly, like, you can have all the training in the world, you can have everyone sit there and give you talks, and you can have all the sessions and every kind of HR degree under the belt, but you will not have that eye.
Experience.
You won't have that eye for seeing that person sat there in front of you and really kind of connecting with them and understanding them.
It's that, what does good look like? And how do we define good? And this is the stuff we talk about like all the time. It's like, if you're only defining good, and I think the PR industry does it replicates the same kinds of people. In some ways, for me, it's like, I mean, it's not to say it's not a real industry, and we will say, is it an industry, is it not? But the rules are almost man-made. And who made up those rules in terms of what it takes to be a good PR?
I think that's a lot of cross-industry.
And it wasn't diverse. So when you're looking for who is the ideal person, if you haven't got that lens or that experience or someone who can support you with that, how are you ever gonna hire people that are not the same as you? Unless you are truly saying this is about culture add, which you see in job descriptions, but I don't think we're there yet in terms of truly saying, okay, they are different to me, but I respect that experience that they have, their understanding of the world, therefore that is going to be a value to my agency or to this role.
I think you've all touched on amazing points, and I think the only thing I would add to that is that when you are a person of colour going into said industry, said company, you always think about 2 things. You're always thinking about what they're thinking and what you're thinking. So whereas I don't know, I can't I can't ask as a white counterpart, I can't speak for them, but it feels like they think of one. And not to belittle or not to be rude about them, but we're always thinking of that double end, right? We're checking both our mirrors, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, yeah, okay, now I know who I am.
And can I do it? And am I in a position to do it? Because it's hard work. The job is hard anyway. PR has issues with mental health. You know, there's so many other issues. And then if you are coming from a minority background, whether that is race, sexuality, whatever that might be, it's just even harder.
100%.
You know, and I think considering that it's a job that is centered around people, although I don't think the job is centered around people, but we are about talking to audiences and relating to people, it actually doesn't make any sense. You know, it's like one of those industries where you're just like, it doesn't make sense that we don't see what is to be gained by having different people behind the scenes.
Must ask, guys, what is your proudest achievement?
Oof. Could have practiced for that one.
I'll go first. I don't think I've had my proudest achievement yet. Because I
want,
you know what I mean?
It's not what we need, man. I need art. Come on, man. I need political. Come on, give me some. Show us some.
I've got my eyes on the cue. No, I think my proudest moment is actually just being here and like still being in the industry, still genuinely like when I wake up every morning, I do still love it. And I think that's like, if you ask anyone in comms, they would be like, yeah, that's a big feat to still do it and hang on to the roller coaster that it can be and stand the test of time and continue to kind of, I hate to say it, like reinvent yourself and be like on it and be on the touch point of culture, all the new kind of, you know, mediums of media and stuff like that. So I think my proudest moment is probably still being here.
Hanging on it.
Come on, I need more from you two guys, come on.
Okay, I'll go. My proudest achievement is launching my agency.
Yes.
Nice easy one there. Nice easy win there. Axe and saw, everyone. I mean, I launched it out of frustration, to be honest, because I paid my time in the industry. it was quite close and quite soon after the George Floyd murder. I spoke to actually Cam about it when I was launching. I was like, hi, please can you help me? I don't know what I'm doing. But like, yeah, genuinely, I was really proud. I had a good job. It was at a big agency. It's all the things that I said I wanted from my career at that point. But the George Floyd thing just shifted something internally. And I think it did for a lot of people of colour, and in particular Black people, where, you know, you were on client calls helping them to navigate their response, but you've told them to be more diverse in their XYZ campaign for the entire time in my role there, and yet they're like, oh, quick, have you got any Black influencers that we can get? And you're like, oh, yeah, actually, this is what I've been trying to tell you. There's a reason this is important. And so I think that a lot of people became very frustrated, and I think disgruntled with the way that they'd actually silenced themselves, appease people, and if everyone was going to sit there and say that they were listening and they're allies and everything else, why wasn't there significant change? And I just thought, I'm sick of asking people to be accepted. I will create the space I want and I believe should be part of the future of the comms industry. And so that for me is Accent Saw. I'm trying, hopefully, making it more inclusive. I'm doing, let's be positive. I'm doing. And so, yeah, I feel like definitely massive imposter syndrome. Again, barely any Black women have their own agency, pretty much bar Cam that I know of, like, personally. And I've definitely gone to seek them out. There's not many of us, so it's definitely a thing that I will say is one of my proudest moments, and hopefully it continues to be that, and I don't crumble.
It will.
You're right.
Similar to Rachel, probably setting up my own agency and setting up Black Comms Network. Like, I did them both more or less at the same time, which was crazy. And I was working a full-time job at the same time. But for me, it was similar to what Rachel said. I felt like, from a Black comms perspective, so many people around George Floyd's murder were sharing their experiences. I already had set up a WhatsApp group of like Black women in PR that I'd been meeting, and it was like, is this a time for us all to connect? And everyone, the kind of one of the running themes was, I didn't know there were other people that were sharing my story. So I almost was like, okay, I need to take the WhatsApp group to another level. What does that look like? That became the Black Comms Network. Yeah. And there's about 200 of us. It's grown really amazing, organically. And yeah, Rachel's part of it. And, there's about 600 like Black comms professionals on our database. So we know that we're here. And the hunch was, if we create a community, maybe more people will stay in the industry. So that is a super proud moment for me. And then a month later, I launched Coldr, my own agency. For many of the frustrations that Rachel talked about, was that I thought a lot of brands needed to be silent. It was the one time I saw, like, we always say in comms, like, you're only as good as the business strategy, right? I'm not saying spin doctors don't exist, they do. But for a lot of us, it's like, okay, you're only going to be communicating or finding ways to elevate or amplify what the business is doing. That was the one time where comms was coming first. And comms people were like, we need to say something. We need to stand in solidarity. And there was no policy, there was no diversity, there was no representation. And I was really frustrated with the industry, and I honestly would have left. I was disheartened by it. I was frustrated with reading all the stories. I'd almost had an epiphany with, like, oh my God, I've experienced racism. Oh my God, I've all these microaggressions. What am I doing? Like, why am I here? So Coldr was like the only way I could do it. And I remember when I launched, I said that I'd never seen a Kamiqua on an audience profile. We were never ever trying to make campaigns that targeted the mainstream and the mass, novel niche, people with different backgrounds. Sometimes it's just small tweaks that means that more people are going to engage with a campaign. And so I was like, well, I'm fed up of telling people to do it. I'm going to do it myself, be the change. And it's like, for us, the whole purpose of it is, we'll show how you do better on purpose. We're not going to convince you that you need to do this differently. We're not going to convince you that representation should be important. Just do inclusive campaigns and marketing, because we should be doing inclusive campaigns and marketing. And so, yeah, I think I'm on that journey. Like with Rachel, it is hard. There are a few amazing like Black women that I've come across. I'm sure there's more than the ones that I know who are doing their thing. And I think but I would say it's a challenge also, because when you present as a Black woman, and in any business, if you present as any kind of minority, people think that's the only work that you do. So it's sometimes a double-edged sword in terms of, okay, it's great if you're doing marketing or products for that community, that's fine, absolutely makes sense. But if I sell tea or if I sell PR and marketing as a black person, it's like, oh, you only do black marketing to black people. No, I'm very good at that. We can do that. But we can all, I've spent my whole career doing PR to everyone. Yeah. So I think that's where it's like, it's great that we're here and we're doing this, but there's still so much further to go in terms of the broader industry, which sometimes you feel part of and sometimes you're not sure if you're part of, gets to that place where we're really talking about what does that look like from a supply chain perspective in terms of who are big brands working with and what does that actually look like.
And I think in 2022, if your strategy to acknowledge D&I issues is a black tile on Instagram.
There needs to be a real relook on
Shout out to the people that still got them on their feed. Real ones, real ones.
Making a change,
real ones
since 20
Yeah, it's true. I was going to say, actually, someone got in contact with me for a bit of new business, and it was a drinks brand, and they... well, the main person was like, yeah, I love the work. And then their like head of marketing was like, got on a call with me and was like, oh, I don't really know if your agency like can handle it because I know you focus on making campaigns diverse. And I was like, beep, beep, beep. We're not supposed to work together.
Wow, yeah.
So it still happens in 2022.
But I mean, lastly, guys, the question I want to ask is, what would you tell your younger self? But I think one thing I would love to ask you guys is going to be a double-barrel question. So what would you tell your younger self, so your university self leaving, and what would you say to what would you look for in someone to assist you? Because I think one of the things I'm learning from this talk is people are going to come up to you now. This is going to go worldwide, and people are going to be like, I want to be the next you. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You guys work in PR. You guys are recent, right? No, but I think people are going to be inspired and they want to follow in your footsteps, and they'll probably contact you. Search you up on LinkedIn, as you said. Yeah. What are you looking for in an assistant or someone to follow, or if they were going to follow you for a week, a month, a day, whatever? And what would you tell your younger self? Yes, that's my question.
I'm going to go straight.
I would tell my younger self, have really thick skin. Say no a bit more often. And who I'd be, I don't know what I'd say to someone who wants to come and follow me for 2 weeks.
Good luck.
Good luck. Be prepared. Do you know what? Here's the thing. I think we're all on this earth to put positive contributions here. So you need to be having a good time. You need to be enjoying yourself and doing good things, and also just being true to yourself. I think that's probably what I'll tell my younger self. Don't compromise on your identity, and be proud of that, because I felt like I did that and I wish I didn't, at the earlier on in my career. Now I'm just like, yeah, whatever. But it shouldn't be that way. So that's what I'd probably tell my younger self.
I tend to agree. I think that you've got I always say this, I've said it a few times, but like, your version of life is valuable and your lived experience is valuable, and you need to bring that to the table. And I definitely think when I was younger, particularly when I was in like fashion college, I really felt just othered, and that can take over. And I think I spent far too many years feeling othered. And it's only now when I feel like I've stepped a bit more into my power. And even from that point, you still need to grow. So my advice to my 16-year-old self is similar to yours, in that just the essence of what makes you, always be working on that and hone in on that. And I think for anyone that wanted to work with me, it's equally that. Like, there's so much pressure to fit in or not fit in, because I think we're tribal to one degree, but almost now tribal is like doing your own thing. But are you really doing your own thing? Are you really doing things that really kind of elevate you, that nurture you, that makes you feel good as a person? And so I know it sounds a little bit holistic, but when you're trying to make the right judgment for things, when you're trying to solve problems, a lot of that is you as a person and how you approach those sorts of situations. So it is about just having a really good understanding of you, and don't stop working on yourself from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what they've said. I'd also just probably add, like, be explorative in your thinking, in your way of being, in the way that people communicate with you. I think I took everything as such gospel when I was younger. Just be like, oh, is that how you do it? And even if it didn't make sense to me, I'd just sign it off and say yes and agree. And actually just taking a step back to thinking how you can explore more. I've seen a lot of new talent who are really like rising through the ranks who have just basically, I think, taken a step back and been like, actually, I could do it a little bit differently. And it's been the magic and the source that has made them so quickly successful. And I think actually respecting the fact that we have all the minerals to be successful and actually just learning from other people, because I definitely think that is one of the best ways for you to grow as a human, but also making sure that you're taking the time to like explore other avenues. Like, just as an example, someone I was speaking to the other day was like, oh, I did photography course and I did this and a that, and obviously now they're like the head of digital because they had these little extra skills that all made them one of the key players way ahead of anyone else in their industry. And I think that if I did that rather than just rushing down the path, that would have helped me as well. Like I definitely did that, but like to more. And
sorry to add on, but your biggest problem is not your biggest problem. As well, because you'll sit and dwell like at the beginning.
Has anyone got a notepad? My biggest problem
is not your biggest problem.
You got a fab.
I do think the common one that everyone says is PR, not ER. I really need to just bang that drum, because honestly, PR is like the front line of any disaster or any. You kind of get forgotten when it's great, actually, which is part of being in the background.
Or it's like some sort of luxury that you add on if you've got time.
Yeah, literally. But it's like, no one is dying unless you're literally working in that type of industry. But like, there's always a way around it. Problem solving, think outside the box. My motto is like, don't present to me cookie cutter thinking, because I have no time for it. Like I want to see things that are slightly different. I want us to always be pushing the boundaries. And I think that you should go into that as a young person, younger me. Please keep doing that, because that is what makes you you.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, guys, and thank you very much for your time. It's been an amazing chat. We could chat all afternoon, honestly.
We definitely could.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you, guys. This has been LCC Value Talks. Thank you, guys, once again.